Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Shop Thursday. Hey, grab that cup of coffee. Yeah, I still have my Christmas mugs out because it's still snowing, and we're going to get some more tomorrow. Okay, hey, during this Lenten season and our Thursday morning times together, we're talking about a Lenten devotional that I'm reading. I'm just sharing that with you. It's called Meeting Jesus at the Table. And last week we talked about how Jesus did this, and even God did it for the people of Israel outside, al fresco, out in the wilderness. Yeah, and how that fits into this whole picture. But today we're going to go back indoors. Yeah, no, not me, not literally, not you and me. We're staying out here outside, but we'll be indoors with Jesus and one of the disciples that he called. And we'll get to that just in a second. Now, in this chapter, it tells us that, there's something you need to look for. Jesus has a lot of stories about him eating with people all over the place, but also a lot of his parables deal with eating and drinking and wedding banquets and all that kind of stuff. And they said to look for three things in there. Look for the symbolic aspects that kind of shine through. The symbolism of God preparing these banquets for us, especially that great heavenly banquet at the very end of all time, one that we see all the way back in the prophet Isaiah. So see that, and then see how throughout these parables there's a lot of extending and receiving hospitality. Yeah, we both invite in and we accept the invitation. So that's going on there. And also realizing, and we need to realize that for the story that they really zero in on this in this chapter, that eating in Jesus' day was both an ethical and a moral thing. Yeah, because when you sat down to eat with someone, you were saying, you're my friend, and hopefully I'm your friend, and you're cementing relationships. So it matters who you're eating with and who you invite to the table. That's very important. So the chapter focuses on a story out of the Gospel of Matthew, the 9th chapter, in which Jesus calls Matthew to be a disciple. Matthew, who is, this is where it gets interesting, a tax collector. Yeah, and when Jesus calls Matthew to be one of his followers, one of his disciples, all of a sudden they find themselves sitting in Matthew's house having dinner. Yeah, Jesus and his disciples are having dinner with Matthew and all of Matthew's friends who are tax collectors and sinners. See, those tax collectors and sinners, they were kind of lumped into one big no group. You don't associate with them. They're the bad people in society. Bad morally and ethically. Yep, you just don't hang around them. And why tax collectors? Because they're in cahoots with the Romans. They're collecting money that gets sent back there to Caesar. And we don't want that. We want to keep our dough right here in town. Okay, so you have this whole situation where that's happening. And when you look at this particular story, there's a couple things that kind of come out at us. I'm looking at my little cheat sheet here in case you're wondering. First of all, Matthew and chapter 9, this little story within the larger story is that it is a call to Matthew. And what's interesting is there's only 4 other disciples who have their call stories recorded in the Gospels. Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And now Matthew. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, well, they're all fishermen, so, hey, they're not the worst of people. They're smelly and stinky, but Matthew, yeah, he really stinks. He's a tax collector. Man, all the other disciples just eventually just kind of show up in the stories, but they don't have their calls that are spelled out in the Gospels. But here it is a call story, and What's interesting about this call story, it's right in the midst of healing stories. Yeah, on either side of it, there's a whole bunch of people getting healed. And when you are healed in Jesus' day, you are restored to society, restored to your families. You can go to church again, because up to this point, if you're sick in any way, you're not allowed to go to church. You got to sit outside the temple and beg for money just to survive. So that's an interesting concept that's going on here. It's also a story of mercy, God's mercy. Yeah, you know, and it's mercy that is unmerited. It's just given to us by God. So when Jesus gets accused of eating and drinking with all these people he should not be eating and drinking with, Jesus just kind of looks at them and he quotes from the Old Testament and says, hey, you know what God desires? Mercy, not sacrifice. So all that time you go and you throw money in the offering plate and you do whatever to show how good and righteous you are, what God wants to see is it happening right here at the table, showing your love, your care, your generosity to those who are outside of the boundaries of what's acceptable. Because we're going to have it in our gospel lesson for this coming Sunday. God so loved the world. Not just, this little group of people here and this little group of people there. No, the world, that he sent his only begotten Son. Oh, wow. You know, it's interesting. Last night in our Noel Lenten devotionals, we had, it was awesome. Hey, we had 40 people there. We had soup and bread and all kind of desserts. But I digress here. What we saw in our devotional time was a little film clip, a little documentary on a musical called Come From Away. And it's about 9/11, the attacks of 9/11, and how people up in a place called Gander, Newfoundland, a population of around 7,000 people, housed about 7,000 more people as their planes were forced down out of the air. A lot of you remember that. Maybe some of you are too young to remember that, but hey, that was a pretty frightening day for all of us, especially in the United States. But it just gripped our hearts. But they welcomed these people. Their table was not closed to anyone. It was wide open. The hospitality was so readily apparent, and people, they didn't ask, okay, where are you from? Who are you? All that kind of stuff. No, you sat down at a table and you ate and you were fed, and people fellowshipped with them. Just an amazing, amazing story of love and graciousness being extended to people that they didn't know who these strangers were passing through, whose planes were forced down. But still, the invitation to eat was wide open. It was right there. And just a wonderful, wonderful story of love and generosity. And isn't that what Jesus extends to all of us, you and me, especially when we go to that table of grace and we receive that bread and that wine? It's an invitation to his love. So when you pick up, and I know in our church we're still using the little cups that have the communion wafer sandwiched in there. When you pick those up and take it back and sit down in your pew, and then when we pull them out a little bit later and eat that wafer and drink that wine, hey, let's think about not just, hey, it's a wafer and it's wine, but this is Jesus. Jesus offering himself to you and to me. Well, I went a little bit beyond what was in that chapter, but hey, I suppose it's there too. So, if you have a chance to pick up the book, Meeting Jesus at the Table, it's an awesome, awesome little read, especially during this Lenten season. Well, God's blessings be with you. Enjoy your time. And for all of us up here in Western New York, get ready to embrace another winter storm. Woohoo! Hey, we haven't had too many of them, but when they've come, man, they've packed a wallop. God's blessings be with you.